Good evening, everyone. This is Paul, and this video is a semi-request from a YouTuber that goes by the name of Tykush. I think it's named after some kind of mayonnaise. So the reason why I say it's a semi-request is that I thought I knew her from somewhere. Apparently I didn't. And I wondered, where we could have met. And she was just like, oh, I saw your Myers-Briggs videos. And ironically, that's how I got most of my subscribers in the first place, is through Myers-Briggs, which shocked me because that wasn't even the original intent of this channel. It was to talk about the Catholic faith to high school age people and also bring in my love of video games. So one day I just happened to make a video about INFJs just for the fun of it, and it's currently my most viewed video. Even though I think I made a total fool of myself, especially with that thumbnail where I'm like ripping my hair out. Well, anyway, I'm here to talk about yet another personality type that I've had a lifetime of experience with. How can I have a lifetime experience with a personality? Because I'm going to be talking about my own, the ISTJ. I have a lot of names that I could give for our type, but just to name a few: the loyalist, the dependable ones, the paranoid ones, the detectives. We have a lot of titles. And that's because we're secretly very adaptable people. The only thing that really prevents us from being a jack of all trades is if we don't have very clear instructions. You could see an ISTJ being a garbage man, policeman, lawyer, judge, you name it. As long as the instruction manual is super detailed, there's tons upon tons of little bits of, if this situation occurs, then here's a backup. Make sure that you do exactly this process. And so as a result, ISTJs are very rule-oriented. At my job, if my boss doesn't tell me exactly what I'm doing, I'll just freeze in place and say, wait, you forgot to tell me what to do in this situation. Yeah, it takes a little bit of patience, but for the most part, when an ISTJ is told to do something, they typically do it because we have a tremendous respect for authority. Now, unlike our ESTJ cousins, we're not as content with bossing people around. I mean, we can be. We're just often reluctant to do it because we might question if we actually have the authority or not. But if we're put in a position where we're told that we do have the authority, we can be surprisingly strict but fair. We hardly ever throw hissy fits at people. We usually give them fair warning and are typically a lot more calm and more composed than an ESTJ. When under stress, an ISTJ tends to retreat inside themselves and go into what's called ISTJ catastrophe mode, or avoidant personality disorder to be even more precise, where we overimagine every single thing that could go wrong and then blame ourselves for it. Because we take great pride in, if a person asks us to get something done, we're going to do it. Like, we're not going to let our feelings get in the way. We're not going to let a deadline get in the way. In fact, we actually prefer deadlines because then that gives us a concrete goal of like when to finish. And then therefore, we know how to maximize every minute of our time to be put to good use. So if we can't do something for someone, we will just outright say we can't. But a lot of ISTJs don't have that maturity, and so they end up piling all these projects on top of them until it eventually gets them to be entirely stressed out because they really beat themselves up if they can't live up to a promise. Now, a couple of things you guys might have noticed about ISTJs is that we have a tendency to put people down a lot. I mean, we are judging types. We do make a lot of like, that person's a weirdo. But we're just as hard on other people as we are on ourselves. Oftentimes we're our very worst critics, and boy, does our inner monologue tear ourselves to pieces. And that's why it's been said in these exact words, ISTJs need to learn how to pat themselves on the back once in a while. And that's why even though we're thinking types, we secretly need a lot of verbal affection from other types, especially the feeling types, because they can remind us that we actually are contributing to the greater good, and no, it's not just our duty, that it actually makes us a good person. So in previous videos, I wanted to focus more on the tertiary and inferior functions of the ISTJ, because I figured that, you know, there's like 10,000 ISTJ videos on YouTube or something along those lines, so you'd probably hear it elsewhere, but I kind of have a unique way of presenting it. So to start out with, our dominant function is introverted sensing, which means that we typically have a tremendous recall for facts, data, something that's tangible, concrete, realistic, out there. When we see a computer, we're going to see a computer. When we see a desk, we're going to see a desk. To us, the real deal is where everything is. We tend to have the best memory of all the types, can easily remember specific dates from like 15 years ago. We can remember exact quotes from movies. We typically don't need a script when we're doing a public speech because we just memorized the whole thing. In fact, when I did Stations of the Cross several years in a row, I was the only person in our entire cast that did not use my script for my line, which everyone else was allowed to have their cheat sheet, and I just had it for the sake of having it, but I never actually looked at it. I just got up on the microphone and recited it word for word. Our secondary function is extroverted thinking, which means we process things out loud, like I'm doing right now. This is my way of externalizing what I've been taking in and then presenting it to you guys. It also means that we're really good with like timetables, schedules, and charts. Introverted thinkers are kind of usually more on their own train of thought and schedule. Extroverted thinkers, especially secondary ones, really love having a plan. They love structure, they love routine, they love things to go a certain way. We tend to get stuck in those patterns sometimes. They call it the rut effect, where like my grandpa, I believe, was an ISTJ, and he ate a bowl of Cheerios every day for 50 years straight. Even I'm not that picky, but ISTJs can get into that habit, and getting them to deviate or try something new is usually very, very easier said than done. I personally get very grumpy if my daily routine is disrupted, or at least I'll not feel as good the next day and try my best to go into work with a happy face, but inwardly I'm just like, I should have had my 4-hour nap. Yeah, ISTJs, we take naps more than ESTJs do, because we realize that if our body and mind are too exhausted, it's not going to be very good for efficiently getting things done. If an ESTJ can do it, good for you. You're a superhuman. We're not. Our third function is introverted feeling, which a lot of people seem to forget that ISTJs have introverted feeling because they have these really stupid stereotypes, and admittedly some of them have some merit, but they're usually vastly overblown. Here's a couple of my favorites. You ISTJs talk like robots. Your voices could be compared to a dial tone on a phone. You guys' faces are so bland that you have the same facial expression for, like, everything. Why do you guys always stand so stiff and upright? Why can't you be loose once in a while? Goodness, your room is so meticulously organized. Do you even organize your sock drawer? No. No, actually, while many ISTJs will try to do that, most ISTJs, when they're comfortable around people, are willing to break out of that fear of being too different and be willing to just go with it. Because we're not extroverted feelers, we're not so much concerned about the peer pressure. So to us, it's not so much how can we impress people, it's how can we fulfill our duty as a guard, as a maid or butler, depending on your gender, I guess. As a dentist, as a nurse, whatever we are, it's all duty oriented, not crowd oriented. So it's more individualistic compared to introverts, not the ESTJs, where they want to like make a huge difference in society. We're just like, well, I'm good enough with helping out my boss, kind of thing. But to sort of talk about where tertiary feeling actually comes into play, because it's so underdeveloped, it's really hard for me to talk about it. But I guess if I had to put it into words, it's kind of like our emotions are there, and we feel them strongly, especially in our own heads, but we have a hard time showing them to the world. As effortlessly as I'm showing you guys all of these thoughts that I have, I barely even touched on my emotions. Like, most of what I'm feeling and thinking right now, including like whether or not I'm anxious that this video will succeed, my face isn't showing it. When I go into work, sometimes people ask, Paul, are you okay? And I'll say, yeah. Why are you asking? And they'll say, well, because you look like you're sad. And I'll be like, I'm not sad. This is just how my face looks. I was smiling at a work meeting today, even though I was secretly dreading the meeting and couldn't wait for it to be over. Stuff like that. Our faces typically don't portray what we're actually feeling. Body language, voice tones, stuff like that. It's really easy for us to hide what we're truly feeling, but sometimes to our detriment, because there might be times when we're with someone and we're comfortable enough where we want to share something, but it just doesn't want to come out. Like, I might have something on my mind and my girlfriend will say, hey, Paul, you want to talk about it? And then I'll like open my mouth and be like, well, you see, this thing is bothering me, and then I usually end up making it almost like a YouTube video that needs to buffer. It's really quite annoying, but since it's introverted feeling and not extroverted feeling, we tend to go based on our own moral system as opposed to like this harmonizing view of where we need to go like by what the general group consensus is. So we're the type of person that like, we won't do anything that's against our morals, and we won't do a tradition for the sake of it. We'll question it. We'll say, is this really a good idea? Do I feel comfortable with this? So if you were to try to manipulate us into doing something that's against, say, the Catholic Church, because I'm the Catholic Nintendo nerd, I'd just flat out say, no, not going to do it. And you wouldn't be able to convince me otherwise, because even though morals in and of themselves are a subjective thing, they're backed up by irrefutable facts. That's why ISTJs make for superb debaters, especially if they're debating the Catholic Church, because as much as those of you that aren't introverted feeling types might like to think, ISTJs don't like going off of their own opinions. They prefer to just say, this is the history of the Catholic Church, this is what the church teaches, and no, that's not what Christianity believes at all. No, sorry, but you got your facts wrong. It's a totally unbiased, almost judge-like perspective. No, not the judge from Ace Attorney. That's the exact opposite of an ISTJ. Now that I mention it, ISTJs can make for very good judges, too. They're good at looking at a situation objectively and being able to say with brutal honesty, this is what I think is the ideal solution. ISTJs never tell a lie. In fact, I don't even think they could tell a lie even if they wanted to, because they're so focused on facts that it's kind of like trying to tell an INFP not to cry when their feelings are hurt. Because they rely so much on feelings, it's very hard for them to suppress that dominant nature. So for us, we'd probably end up correcting ourselves seconds later if we accidentally lied. Or we would probably end up like, if we tried to lie, people would be like, I know you're lying, just tell the truth. That's why most ISTJs don't like sarcasm, because we're very literal, factual people. So when something is vague or abstract, we're just not going to get it, we're not going to like it, we're probably going to make some kind of cutting remark like, why the heck do you guys have to talk like such a wordsmith? No, granted, an ISTJ that's developed their feeling side enough may adhere very strictly to Victorian era-esque rules, and so Many ISTJs of the politer variety, they tend to have a very good grasp on manners. So they'll carry themselves in a very proper, gentlemanly or proper ladylike way. But then the judgment comes in when people don't live up to those standards, and they'll say, no, that is totally improper for you to be dressed like that. How dare you? Don't you know that it's proper to hold open the door for a woman? Yeah, we're kind of traditionalists, and we don't exactly like to experiment much, which brings me into the inferior function, which is extroverted intuition. Where do I start? Basically, we hate the new stuff. We really hate innovation. We hate progress. We hate the future. We hate pretty much anything that hasn't been already established. We're the type of people where if VCRs hadn't switched over to DVDs, none of us would have cared. We would have been like, VHS has got the job done before, and they'll get the job done now. Every time a new Nintendo system comes out, I'm always cringing, like, oh man, how will they butcher it this time? Usually when this brand new idea comes out for a video game, I'm just like, oh man, this is going to be an epic failure. And my friend Mike, who's an ESTP and is an extroverted sensor that thrives on new experiences, he has a heck of a time getting me to try something new, because I'm just like, no, I don't want to risk it. I don't want to waste my time playing something that's probably going to end up stinking, and 9 times out of 10 I'm right. My INTJ best friend Andy has an even harder time because he has dominant introverted intuition. So usually it's a fight for tooth and nail to get me to like go out of my established way, especially when it comes to board games, because he loves board games. I can't stand them. They rely too much on luck. So ISTJs like games that have a clearly defined set of rules that you can always know how to play the game, even if you're not good at it. That's why a lot of ISTJs are really good at chess, because there is absolutely no luck in chess. It's all about how much mental acuity you have. ISTJs are very logical people, sometimes to a fault, but they won't do so much that they'll completely destroy a person. In fact, if an ISTJ were ever to get to like that ESTJ level of just like completely pummeling the person's feelings to the point where they're like having doubts about their self-esteem, we'll feel really, really, really terrible. I myself personally have given profuse apologies on Facebook saying, hey, I did not mean to hurt your feelings at all. I just didn't detect that anything was wrong. You didn't tell me anything. I'm sorry. What can I do to make up for it? Deep down inside, ISTJs are very passionate lovers. We're very loyal people that typically when we make a really good friend, we're sort of stuck to life. I guess you could compare us to leeches. It definitely makes interacting with the NFJ types extremely frustrating, and boy, can my girlfriend tell you stories about that. Because those types have, the INFJs have the door slam, and the ENFJs have the ultimatum. Practices that most ISTJs despise and even fear. The prospect of just completely shutting someone out of your life and abandoning is actually among the top 10 worst fears of an ISTJ. We hate just the total seclusion of humanity whatsoever. Yes, we're introverts. We need a lot of alone time. We need to be away from people. We prefer, if we're the social variety of introvert, like yours truly, we prefer like 1 to 2, maybe 3 if we're feeling really good people. But we don't like large groups. We don't like being the center of attention. Usually we have to be forced to do something that involves like socializing or business calls or advertising, because we don't have that charismatic personality that can attract people to something. And besides, because I value honesty so much, I have had instances where I'm trying to market something, but I will also point out the product's flaws in the process. So like my best friend and I were trying to sell some soup for a fundraiser, and he was saying like, oh, let's just gloss over the fact that we put too much milk in it. Not me though. I said, guys, you might want to avoid this soup because I made it and I put too much milk in it, so it'll probably end up tasting terrible. It was the best selling soup of the whole place. Also, we're good at very honestly picking out what is objectively wrong with something, which makes us pretty good reviewers, I guess. I mean, I certainly have my fair share of criticisms against ISTJs. One thing that I really can't stand about them is when they take life too seriously and can't, chuckle a little. Most ISTJs that have developed their social side are actually some of the funniest comedians that you'll ever experience. Because they're so good at remembering their lines, they can often do very good imitations. Also, ISTJ is the most common personality type to have Asperger's syndrome. So if a lot of this sounds familiar, you might have someone with Asperger's or autism in your life. Very, very possible. We also hate wasting time, which is why I am cringing at the fact that this video is going on for far too long. But I've spoken about the ISTJ enough in other videos, so I'm sure you can search through them. But I hope this gave you a decent enough in-depth look at the ISTJ and dashed some stereotypes. If I missed anything, which I'm bound to have at this rate, please let me know in the comments section. I always respond to comments if they're respondable. So like if someone just says, "Great video, dude," I won't necessarily respond to that because it doesn't really warrant a response. It's just like, oh, cool. But if it's something like, "Hey, Paul, what do you think about ISTPs?" then I'll, answer it. Or they'll say, "Paul, dude, I can't believe you made a call out to this cool video game." And then I'll start fanboying with you in the comments. Stuff like that. So I love interacting with you guys. Being an introvert, that's like one of our best ways to interact is through typing, because then we can take our time to think out what we're going to say. So please correct me if I'm wrong so I can keep improving in the future. And until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye.